Joe Wilson issue, him screaming out "you lie" in the middle of Obama's speech, whether that was a racial issue, whether that was a racist act, I think that's a really interesting conversation. We're going to have that a little bit later, and you'll see where I come out on that. And then we have some, what I view to be excellent news on the foreign policy side. You know, the right wing certainly has been tough on Obama for insane reasons, and we've got more of those conspiracy theories today. And we've been kind of tough on him for, you know, being too soft. That's one way of putting it, okay, on the domestic policy front. But I'll tell you what, man, foreign policy, I really think he's nailing it, okay? And I've got proof for you today, so we will discuss that. Now, let's start with our usual friend, our old friend. Yes, I know. I'm almost, not almost, I'm also a little tired of talking about the public option. But look, we have the politics of it, and I'm going to give you some quick updates on that a little later in the program. But two things that I thought were fun, instructive, and slightly unexpected is what we're starting with. First, Barack Obama is giving a speech at the University of Maryland, and it's a college park, and he's going to mention the public option in one instance, and he's going to mention Max Baucus's plan in another. And I just want you to get a sense of the difference. And the reason I'm really encouraged by this is because these are real people, okay? Now, I don't mean to juxtapose them to the 9/12 guys, et cetera, et cetera. No, I mean, they're not politicians, they're not senators, they're not the media. They're people that are listening to his speech, and now they're a little younger, which I'm also encouraged by. But get a load of the positive reaction he gets when he mentions the public option. Let's start with that first.
Said that one of the options.
Having a little issue there, having a little issue. We got an issue in America with our computer today. All right, give me a sense of whether we can do it or not. We got it? Let's try.
A public insurance option. Let me be clear. Let me be clear. It would only be an option. No one would be forced to choose it. No one with insurance would be affected by it. But what it would do is provide more choice and more competition and put pressure on private insurers to make their policies affordable and treat their customers better. Now, think about it. There's some folks who said, well, this is a government takeover of health care. We've got public universities and private universities. Nobody says that we're taking over private colleges. What we're doing is giving students a choice. You should have a choice the same way in your health care.
Now that seems to be a fairly positive reaction, right? I was very, very heartened by that. When he mentioned the public insurance option in a crowd that was fairly tame up until that point, goes and goes bananas over it. That's fantastic, right? I hope he's listening to that crowd. Now, he's going to mention the Max Baucus bill coming out of the Senate Finance Committee that does not have a public option. Let's see if he gets a similar reaction from the crowd. Let's see if they like it as much as they like the public option. All right, that one's going to take a little longer? Okay. Let me point out that we're getting both of these videos, by the way, from Jed Lewison of Daily Kos. And I think he's the one who found this comparison in the first place. I think he did a great job with it. So now let's check out the reaction to Max Baucus instead.
4 out of 5 committees in Congress have completed their work. Yesterday, the Finance Committee, under the leadership of Max Baucus, put out its own bill. Each bill has its strengths, and there are a lot of similarities between them.
He got boos there. You hear that? And people grumbling. They didn't. Now, if you compare those two things, the reaction that he got for the public option from the audience and the reaction he got from the Max Baucus option, or the Max Baucus version of the bill, which seemed to come out on top? Now, unfortunately, Associated Press has a story out today about how industry has reacted to the Baucus bill. You're not going to be surprised to find out they loved it. Ecstatic. They're like, yeah, you know, it's really a step in the right direction. And you know, what was so frustrating is, so I see that quote in the Associated Press story. Then I open up the USA Today. Huge headline. Baucus bill said to be step in the right direction. You know, you wonder about media, corporate control of media, does it affect it, et cetera. So I'm like, that's the headline you went with for the Baucus bill, which was panned by the Democrats. And at this point, luckily, it does not seem like it's got a lot of momentum, right? And not, hey, it was greeted with criticism, but step in the right direction. By the way, you know who else said that? A direct quote? Olympia Snowe, Republican senator from Maine. This bill's a step in the right direction. Now, it wasn't enough of a step in the right direction for her to sign on to it, but when the lobbyists for the healthcare industry put out that memo, the politicians and the media go, yes, sir! May we have another, sir? So then it rings out throughout the land, step in the right direction. But when it meets a real crowd, it didn't look like that audience at the University of Maryland thought it was a step in the right direction, did it? I don't think so. So in the Associated Press story, unfortunately, it mentioned at one point that the Baucus bill is the one that has been pushed by industry and the White House, and that it had the same compromises and negotiations and deals that the White House has already struck with the pharmaceutical companies, the hospitals, and the insurance companies. So why Obama's White House has decided to, it appears behind the scenes, put its muscle behind the least popular version of this bill is an open question. Now, of course, one of the possible answers to that question is that that is where the bread is buttered. But we've gone over that a lot. So now let me go to even more surprising turn of events on the public option. Get prepared to fall out of your seat here. The least likely guy in America to back the public option has backed it. Bill O'Reilly. I couldn't believe this, but let's watch him talking here with one of his guests, and then come back and analyze what we think he might mean here. Let's watch.
The public option now is done. We discussed this as where it's not going to happen. But you say that this little marketplace that they're going to set up, whereby the federal government would subsidize some insurance for Americans, that is, in your opinion, a public option.
Well, it has a massive new federal regulation, so you don't necessarily need a public option if the federal government's going to control and regulate the type of health insurance that Americans can buy, regardless of if it's...
Ms. Okachinko, I want that. I want, not personally for me, but for working Americans to have an option that if they don't like their health insurance, if it's too expensive, they can't afford it, if the government can cobble together a cheaper insurance policy that gives the same benefits, I see that as a plus for the folks.
What? What? He sees that as a plus for the folks. That's amazing, man. Look, I'm just stunned that he has said something so reasonable. And you know what? You got to give him credit here. Look, some people are already pointing out the hypocrisy. Just last month, he said, quote, the government to run the nation's healthcare system, that's what the progressives want, he claimed. That's because the feds can then redistribute income much easier, shifting resources to the poor and away from corporations and the affluent. It's not really about healthcare, it's about socialism. So he's doing the same exact thing. And then you can say, hey, listen, he's now, coming out in favor of it because he knows it's dead, as he mentioned in the beginning of that segment. And it's too little too late. And well, you can say all those things, right? No. But the bottom line is, he just clearly said that he was in favor of the public option. And I think you have to give him credit for that. Is there any way in the world that Rush Limbaugh would have ever said that? Not in a million years. Glenn Beck? No way. Sean Hannity? Not in a billion years, right? And look, I've said this before. O'Reilly is by far the smartest out of all those guys. Doesn't mean he's a good guy. It doesn't mean I don't disagree with him on 98% of the stuff. It doesn't mean that he doesn't make up stuff from every once in a while, which he does. And the list goes on, right? But at least he has a brain. And he's not a robot like Hannity that just repeats things. He's not a maniac like Glenn Beck. And some might say that makes him more dangerous because he's definitely a smart guy. But from time to time, he surprises you by coming out and saying things that are somewhat reasonable. Now, another theory is, hey, you know what? He's coming out in favor because he sees the polls. And he says that the American people are overwhelmingly in favor of it. and he wants to be on that side and not against it, especially after the issue in his mind appears to be dead. It's not like it's actually going to pass. You can make all those arguments. Nonetheless, today, in my mind, Bill O'Reilly gets a ton of credit for coming out on the right side. You know, you can mitigate that in 100 different ways, but I know none of the other conservative hosts would have done that. So, and is he right? Of course. What's wrong with an option, right? Give the folks, as O'Reilly calls them, give the folks an option. You know what? I'm going to start quoting O'Reilly from now. Come on, Congressman, give the folks an option. Now, you know, Ron Wyden wrote a really, on a substantive note here, wrote a really great article, editorial in the New York Times today. And he's been pushing for something all along, and he's been ignored for so long. I don't know why. I do know why. Because the White House put all of its eggs in Baucus's basket for some reason, and they ignored Wyden. If the White House kept talking to Wyden instead of Baucus, then everybody would be talking to Wyden. Now, look, some people have issues with his proposals, and he's had some questionable votes in this area. So Wyden's kind of a bit of a mystery in healthcare, right? But I don't think he's coming at it from the wrong place. I think he's got a genuine interest in getting this thing right. And the specific thing that he's pushing for is called the Free Choice Amendment now. And put aside everything else, I think this amendment is excellent. What's he saying? And it's a little twist on what the discussion we've been having before. And the reason I'm excited by it is because it actually gives you options that might or might not be the public option, right? But that could contain costs. See, that's what I've been looking for. Remember, JR and I had a discussion a couple of days ago saying, hey, Obama, tell us how you're going to control costs without the public option, because I haven't seen any reasonable attempt at that, right? So here it is. Wyden says, look, the problem here is lack of competition, right? That's why the prices are high and companies don't feel a need to lower them at all. So let's introduce competition by doing this. Right now, even if they do this current plan with the public option, it would only be available to about 25 million people, and the great majority of the country could not sign on to it because they have to stay with their employer coverage. And he's like, that doesn't make any sense. Why don't we open it up to everybody? But here's the deal. Does your employer still have to give you the insurance? Yes. Okay, we don't want to undermine that system. It's going to be a mess otherwise. But right now, they only give you one choice. And they say, here's your coverage. And if you don't like it, that's a sad day for you, right? Now, some places I've seen give you a couple of choices. But what Wyden is saying is, look, let's make it official. They have to give you two choices. And one of them has to be affordable and cover pre-existing conditions, et cetera, and all that stuff. Now, they could either pick two different alternatives that are private, or an easy way for them to do it would be to give the alternatives of a private one or one that is, for example, the public option, right? Or something akin to the public option. You don't have to call it that. But it has to be something that covers everybody and is affordable, okay? And he said, if you do it through your employer, well, then it opens up the whole marketplace, because then you can't, it's not a monopoly anymore. So, you know, United Health can't sit there and go, well, what difference does it make? As long as I convince the chief executive officer of that company to go with my insurance, I don't give a damn how the employees feel under that insurance. No, now the employees get to choose between the different options. Now, I'm simplifying it a little bit, but I think that's a fairly obvious and good idea. And again, if conservatives cared about controlling costs, they'd obviously be in favor of it. But since it introduces competition to their beloved corporations, of course they will come out strongly against it. And as you saw there in the O'Reilly clip, the woman from the Heritage Foundation, she's like, well, the public option is dead. Yes, we killed that. But anything that we can call a government program, in other words, healthcare reform at all, if they touch healthcare industry in any way, shape, or form, we're going to call it a government-run program and insist that also be killed. Now, the way things are going these days, the White House is probably likely to listen to that and take it under consideration. Well, how could we do healthcare reform without doing anything? Because, you know, if the government is not involved, then the Republicans can't beat us up for it. Now, look, I partly say that because I just saw a Washington Post article where they're having a real discussion about how to counter some of the right-wing, conspiracy theories, radical positions, The crazy stuff that they're throwing out there, the death panels, the birthers, et cetera, right? And finally, apparently, it's gotten through their thick skulls that if you let it keep going, eventually it's going to cause a lot of damage, right? Not the first one might not, the second one might not, but by the third one, it starts to get ingrained in people's heads. And that's what the New Jersey poll is all about. So I might come back with that in the next segment. Because, man, some of this stuff has really taken hold in at least a significant percentage of the population, right? So they have apparently wisened up to that to some degree. But they're having a conversation of how hard they should hit back. Should they be, soft or a little soft or very soft? Those are, your basic options. And because they're Democrats, of course. What amused me about that was, imagine a conversation in the Bush administration about how to respond to Democratic attacks. My guess is that the options would have been incredibly and brutally hard or nuclear. Okay? The difference between the Democrats and the Republicans are unbelievable. I don't want to be Republicans. I don't want to go nuclear on every issue. I don't, want to burn everything to the ground, right? It's not the reasonable way to go. On the other hand, the Democrats are so put and soft, it just drives you crazy. Look, I was talking to my dad today. He made a good point. We're having a conversation about how to reach out. I think it was my dad. Reach out to the Republicans. He said, imagine if the Republicans had this kind of majority. They have Republican president. They have 60 Republican senators and an easy and overwhelming majority in the House. Do you think they would have had a conversation about reaching out to the Democrats? How to be bipartisan? And really try to get a Democrat on board for their proposals? And that they would have done a gang of six that had, well, even though they have much larger numbers, 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans? Do you think any of that is within miles of possible? Hell no, man. I want to say it even stronger than that. The Republicans would have gotten every single thing on their agenda passed. Every one of them. They would have steamrolled the Democrats. I mean, Bush talked about how he had a mandate when he won 51% of the vote. 51% of the vote. If they had these kind of majorities, they would have crushed everything in their way. Look, and it matters because that's policy. Politics of who gets elected, that's cute. But if it doesn't lead to the right policy, it's irrelevant. And when it comes to policy, the Democrats are soft and the Republicans get the job done. They certainly did under Bush. They passed one terrible law after another, after another, after another. They had only one big failure, and that's it, when they tried to take down Social Security. Then the Democrats fought a little bit and won. On the other hand here, we run into brick wall after brick wall, and we're trying to figure out how to appease the brick wall. All right, Young Turks, come right back. All right, back on TYT. Before we move on from Baucus's proposal, one more quick note. Guess what happened to the healthcare insurance stock when Baucus's proposal was released? You guessed it, went up again. They're like, ooh, that's good news. Me likey. So, but look, the overall good news is that that the other Democrats do not like Baucus's proposal. I'm honestly a little surprised at how much that they've bashed it, and so it doesn't look good for the Baucus proposal now. I wonder what the White House is thinking now because they had put all their eggs in that basket. Are they reshuffling the eggs at this point? Can it get worse? Sure. In the Associated Press story, they said healthcare industry overall really liked the Baucus proposal, but they thought, well, we could probably make it a little better. We're going to work on making it a little bit more favorable to us. Don't think it can't happen, okay? But right now, you would think the White House has to be thinking maybe we go in a different direction, a harder direction. Now, there are some people who are already going in the harder direction. MoveOn is back. Look, I have not heard anything from them for a long time, to be honest with you. Yes, I've seen things, but I thought that they were fairly ineffectual, to be honest. Now, they're bringing the red-handed commercials back. Now, if you remember these, in 2006, they ran these commercials of Republican congressmen caught red-handed, basically taking money the whole specter of corruption was brought up, and they were very, very effective, to the point where Rahm Emanuel even thought they were effective. And normally Rahm Emanuel loves to beat up on MoveOn and anyone loosely associated with any liberal cause or organization. So now they're bringing it back in the fight against the healthcare industry and tying the Republicans into them. It's a great idea. Let's check out one of their ads right now. Clip number 9.
Congressman Patrick Teaberry, caught red-handed taking hundreds of thousands from health and insurance interests, then voting against reforms those interests oppose. Patrick Teaberry, caught red-handed voting against lowering costs, against providing access to quality coverage no matter what happens to your health or job. Does Patrick Teaberry think special interest wealth is more important than your family's health? MoveOn.org political action is responsible for the content of this advertisement.
All right, there we go. One, they're absolutely right on the substance of it. He does take money from those guys, and he does think it's more important than his constituents. There's no question about that. Now, you could run that ad against a lot of Democrats, too. In this case, they're running it against Patrick Teaberry, Republican of Ohio, and Dave Reichert, Republican of Washington. But I'll tell you what, that ad has a little demagoguery in it. Little cute babies, pregnant women, and children, and then they have the scary music in the background. Does he care more about the healthcare industry than your family? Hey, I like it. When was the last time left, I don't know if you want to call it left wing, left side, liberal, progressive, Democrat, call it whatever you like. When's the last time that side had an ad that demagogued a little bit? Every Republican ad's like, they're going to kill your children and then eat them. Right? Jong, 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 jong. And that stuff works, man. And in fact, I remember the last time a Democratic ad had a little demagoguery. Hillary Clinton's red phone ad during the primaries. And of course, that was run against another Democrat. And guess what happened? That one worked. And that's partly responsible for her winning Texas and maybe even Ohio. So now all of a sudden, somebody's hitting hard. I like it. And the overall message is definitely right. So I got no problems being behind this ad. There we go, MoveOn. There we go. Somebody's back in the house. So now we got other people hitting hard, and of course Democrats questioning that. It's always, you get up a little, down a little bit. Henry Waxman's going to put together hearings in the House side, and he's going to bring in the healthcare industry executives and ask them exactly what I asked them to ask them, which is, hey, how did you accumulate tell me about your stock options and tell me about your homes and how you accumulated your yachts and other things while you were denying people health care and they were dying. So tell me about that practice of rescission again, because I found that kind of interesting. So tell me about it. In fact, a couple of stories from that from today, okay? South Carolina court has just ruled that a kid with HIV who was denied coverage by his healthcare company is going to get $10 million. You know why? He was about to give blood and he found out that he had HIV. And so they're like, whoa, the company involved was like, well, that's a lot of money, man, to take care of this kid. He's 17, wouldn't expect him to get sick. Insurance, what name's so? They're like, no. And they found a note from his nurse where they thought it said something that might be interpreted as possibly related to HIV. And they're like, he should have known. No, rescission. We're going to deny you coverage. And then later, in the middle of all this, a doctor comes out and says, no, the nurse note had nothing to do with that. It is absolutely clear, the doctors agree, he did not have a pre-existing condition, and he did not know about it. He did not fill out any form wrong. They're like, yeah, on the other hand, it's still going to be expensive to cover him, so no. And they had a conservative judge in this case. And they came out and said, no, this is outrageous. You can't just not cover people. The whole point of your product is insurance. If they get sick, you're supposed to cover them. And you did this on purpose, $10 million. See how you like them apples. And that just went above another case where a woman had cancer and they got $9 million for it because they cut her and for the same things they knew that they had no reasonable basis to cut her, and they did just because they didn't want to pay it. There was earlier House hearings that showed that the top 5 healthcare insurance companies in the country make $300 million a year through this practice of rescission. Rescission, all it is as soon as somebody gets sick, you go back and look at their old forms. If they filled anything out wrong, you deny them coverage. Now, the president mentioned one of the extreme cases of that. He got it a little wrong. Let me tell you what it actually is. He said that somebody, and I had mentioned this before, that a woman had cancer, and they went back to her forms and said, oh, the president said, you have acne, you had acne, you didn't tell us, right? No, it turns out the real story is she did have acne, but once they found out she had acne, the insurance company said, yeah, you call it acne, I call it precancerous lesions. Like, are you serious? So then they had the doctors from both sides analyze it, and they came up with a conclusion. Acne, right? It had nothing to do with cancer. And guess what the insurance company did? You see a pattern here? The insurance company said, yeah, you say tomato, I say tomato. I'm sticking with precancerous lesions. We deny coverage. And then she had to wait for 5 months. And then her tumor, the president said, doubled. It actually tripled in size while she's waiting to get covered. And eventually, again, she had to go and petition her congressman. The congressman had to get involved to make sure she got covered, which was absolutely her right. She bought the policy. They should have paid her off on it. Now, by the way, who came into the rescue there? Oh, right, the government did. Now, imagine the utopia that the Republicans have in their mind where there's no government. Well, if private insurance wants to screw you, they call it a precancerous lesion. Yeah, your pimple. Sad day for you. You're not covered. You're not covered if you have breast cancer. You're not covered if you have other kinds of cancer. You're not covered if you have HIV. Why? Because, hey, free market, baby. We decided to go in that direction. What are you going to do about it? You know what? What you're going to do is, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or a Republican, you're going to turn to the government, whether it's your congressman or whether it's the courts, and say, hey, wait a minute, this ain't right. This guy's screwing me. You're right. And you see, that's what you need for capitalism to work. You need refs, like judges, to come in and say, you did wrong. You violated the contract, as happened in the HIV case and the earlier cancer case. So now Waxman wants to hold hearings on this and say, how many times have you done it? How many people have died through it? How much money did you make from it? What did that turn into as far as your bonus is concerned? And by the way, yes, those top 5 companies also reward, some of them do, I should say, reward bonuses based on how many times an employee has done rescission, how many times they've denied coverage for someone who got sick. That's what they base their bonuses on. No, but we should trust the private insurance companies. I'm sure they have our best interests in mind and not their profits. You'd have to be mental to trust them. So as Waxman is going to put together these hearings, which I think is fantastic and should have been done from day one. In fact, I suggested that they do it from day one, right? Now, so they're going to do it. So what do some Democrats say? They're like, oh, you know what? We're concerned because, grilling these insurance executives, it might be problematic. And there's so many problems in healthcare reform. Do you really want to just concentrate on the insurance companies? That doesn't seem fair. I was like, what kind of moron would say that? And of course, you read the article, and it turns out it's the blue dog Democrats who don't want to control costs, who don't want to control the deficit. All they want to do is protect their buddies in corporate America. But luckily, Waxman is not listening to them. They are going to hold those hearings. And you better believe I'm looking forward to it, and we're going to roll tape on those. So we're going to get some good stories coming out of there. All right, now let me give you that New Jersey poll I was telling you about. Okay, buckle up, buckle down. Here comes an unbelievable poll. This is from Public Policy Polling. Now, they polled some other states and the nation as well. Those results have not come out yet, but the first result is from New Jersey, which they say is actually the lowest of the 5 states in terms of the birthers that are in them, okay, that they polled. So it's not like this is an outlier to the extreme right. New Jersey is a very blue state. It's a Democratic state. Now get a load of these numbers. 33% of New Jersey Republicans think President Obama is not a U.S. citizen. A full third of Republicans in New Jersey don't believe the president was born in America. That's an insane conspiracy theory. And a third of the Republicans in New Jersey believe it. All right, continue it. If you think that's bad, 14% of New Jersey Republicans believe that Barack Obama is the Antichrist. 14%. All right, here come now, those are Republicans, here comes conservatives. 18% of self-described conservatives thought Obama was Satan incarnate, and 17% weren't sure. Like, well, he could be the rebirth of Satan, or maybe not, maybe just Beelzebub, not sure yet. That's 35% when you put those two together, thinking that he's Satan or not sure. You leave out the not sure part. 18% of conservatives in New Jersey think that Obama is Satan incarnate. Okay, and the White House wonders whether these ridiculous attacks are having any effect, whether they're getting through to some people. And they're having a gentlemanly debate within the White House about what shall we do about it? Well, bring out the tea. You know what you should do? You should punch them in the mouth until their teeth rattle. I'm not talking about the conservatives and the Republicans in New Jersey. I'm talking about the people spreading these lies. If you don't call it out clearly and forcefully, they take hold. And it's not just Republicans. Now, overall, New Jersey, okay, 21% of all respondents thought Obama was not born in the United States. 1/5 of a very blue state like New Jersey believes Obama's not a citizen, that he's illegitimately president of the United States. And 8% overall of people living in New Jersey believe that Obama is the Antichrist. And they're having a debate as to how they should answer these charges. You have to come out and say these people are goddamn liars. Okay? They're trying to trick you with their stupid, insane conspiracy theories. And if you believe it, you're a moron of the highest degree. Instead, they say, well, you know, we don't want to offend the Republicans. He hit them a little bit during that Wednesday speech, and Lindsey Graham came out and said, oh, you know what? This is ruining bipartisanship. That speech was mean-spirited. I didn't like it. I think he's killing my grandma, but he better not say anything bad about me. Oh, man, if I was in charge. Oh, let me at him. Let me at him. I don't know why they've got these kids' gloves on. It's taken hold, man. Pay attention to the polls. They're getting through to some percentage of the country, and in New Jersey, it appears to be a significant percentage, and you've got to reach out and let people know that this isn't true. If you don't do it, who's going to do it? They're swift boating you on every issue. It's like, then they're going to come back and go, oh, yeah, right, just like they did with John Kerry. Yeah, maybe we shouldn't have let him get away with all those lies. You don't say. Huh, yeah, that's interesting. I wish we'd have thought of that earlier, they'll say. Now, look, finishing up this New Jersey thing. This also goes towards a second point, which is that the Republicans have become a party of losers and lunatics, okay? And that's, when I was growing up, I've said this often, it's true. When I was growing up, my family and friends were about 50-50 Democrats and Republicans. Okay, my father was a Republican, I was a Republican. Yeah, you know, I was younger, whatever. Right? Youthful indiscretion, right? But there was a real debate, and New Jersey was a swing state. And like I said, half and half. Right now, my family and friends are still in New Jersey. A lot of them are. Right? Not a single one of them is a Republican. Because what are you going to do? You're going to go to a Republican meeting with these lunatics? And you're going to be like, oh, yeah, oh, Antichrist, yeah, of course he is. Yeah, Obama's Satan. Ah, yeah. Okay. And, oh, yeah, I'm born in Kenya, of course. Yeah, yeah, he's not a citizen. I mean, if I was in a meeting and those guys are saying, I'd run. Like, these people have lost their minds. And that's what's happened to the Republican Party. They've lost their minds. So that's why they're a minority in New Jersey, a significant minority, almost a minority that cannot be corrected, dwindling. Now, look, you can say, hey, there's a Republican who's doing fairly well in the governor's race in New Jersey. Yes, and on a local level, Republican, Democrat, that's still an issue in all the states, no matter how blue or red they are. But on a national level, ain't no way New Jersey going to vote for a Republican for president. No way, no how, man. That's because the people that are remaining Republicans in New Jersey are out of their effing minds. All right. I got more. Come right back, Young Turks. All right, back on the Young Turks. Now we're going to talk about an issue that's also in the news this week that we haven't touched on yet, and that is some new FBI figures on marijuana. And in order to help us have that conversation, we're going to bring on Norm Stamper. He's a retired Seattle police chief. Norm, welcome to the Young Turks.
Thanks very much.
So what's the amazing stat that came out today, Norm? I should say this week, Norm.
Well, actually, it would help if you refresh my memory. I know that the simple facts of marijuana and marijuana arrests and so forth are that over 100 million Americans have smoked marijuana at least once. Every year, almost 2 million Americans are arrested for nonviolent drug offenses. About 830 to 870 of them for marijuana, and of that number, 90% for simple possession.
So the
so
numbers
every minute, I think there are 3 marijuana arrests in this country. That's probably the specific statistic that you were looking at.
That's right, Norm. You know, they came out, the FBI numbers came out this week and said that there's a drug arrest every 18 seconds in the country.
Right.
Every 18 seconds, meaning more than 3 a minute. And when you break it down a little further, it shows that 82.3% of all drug arrests in 2008 were for just possession, and 44.3% of drug arrests were for possession of marijuana. Okay. Now, that's a pretty high number there. Now, when you were police chief, let me start with that, Norm.
Sure.
What percentage of the drug problem, meaning the arrests for drugs, et cetera, and the crime revolving around drugs, the gangs, et cetera, were marijuana, and what percentage was the other drugs?
Well, Seattle's an anomaly as American cities go. For example, contrasted against New York City, which last year made over 40,000 simple marijuana possession arrests. We would make on the magnitude or the order of 300 to 400 a year during the time that I was the chief there. In 2003, this is 3 years after my retirement, the voters of Seattle decided to make marijuana enforcement, binding on both the police department and the prosecutor's office as the lowest enforcement priority in the city. And so those already very small numbers dropped even more dramatically to just a few dozen a year.
Well, I noticed that after Seattle stopped enforcing the marijuana possession, et cetera, that Seattle just went crazy, and that it's nearly fallen off the map in the continental United States.
Yeah, it got ripped apart at the seams. It was just horrific. We had no impact on public health. We had no increase in youthful use of marijuana, and that's a finding that was based on research, but is also totally consistent with what we see in the Netherlands and throughout the world when communities move to normalize marijuana use. It has a very interesting effect, and perhaps it has something to do with reducing, if not eliminating, the mystique that's associated with that particular substance. But we find, for example, that Dutch kids use marijuana at about half the rate of American kids. And we still have, in many jurisdictions, pretty harsh penalties in this country, where, in fact, it has been more or less normalized in the Netherlands.
You know, it's funny because I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and I remember when I was a kid in like 4th or 5th grade, so one of my friends came up, and not a friend, somebody I knew from school, came up and offered me marijuana. Because it was illegal, it seemed like so, interesting and different. No one ever came up and offered me cigarettes. Now as under 18, you can't have cigarettes either, right?
That's correct.
But it wasn't a big deal. But the fact that marijuana was illegal made it so interesting.
Oh, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's something that absolutely cries out to be tried, to be experimented with. But we're a society, that has, particularly one that has been conditioned to to the insult that is prohibition, decides that for a variety of reasons it is in fact going to normalize a particular substance and regulate that substance, it does in fact remove much of the mystique.
We're talking to Norm Stamper. He's not only retired Seattle police chief, but he's also part of LEAP, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, 13,000 member organization representing cops, judges, prosecutors, prison wardens, and others who now think it makes sense to legalize and regulate and tax marijuana. Before we get to the taxing part, real quick, I want to go back to that idea because I don't know this, Norm. Throughout the country, not in Seattle because you said it's an anomaly, but throughout the country, what percentage of the drug business is marijuana, roughly, and what percentage is other drugs?
Oh, I would only be guessing because it does vary from one jurisdiction to the next, but let's put that figure at roughly 80%.
80% is marijuana?
When you stop and think about the fact that marijuana is now the country's #1 cash crop, it exceeds corn and wheat combined.
Wow.
It is in the top 3 in 12 states, and in 3 states, California being one of them, where I was born and raised and spent 28 years in the San Diego Police Department. It is the #1 cash crop. And of course, it is a product that is consumed by very large numbers of Americans. It is a product that is essentially unregulated. It is certainly untaxed, and unlike alcohol and tobacco, other drugs, the government benefits not one whit from the commerce associated with that particular drug.
So are you
Heroin,
on board?
cocaine, crystal meth, so on and so forth, they're all very significant issues in communities across the country, but by comparison to the amount of product that's out there, they pale.
Now, are you on board for not just legalizing but taxing marijuana, and how much money do you think roughly that we could raise from that?
Billions of dollars. Professor Jerry Myron at Harvard University, I think, estimated somewhere around $8 or $9 billion a year would be netted. But I think it's also important to point out that if we were to end the drug war and the roughly $70 billion that we pump down the rat hole every year in support of prosecution of the drug war, we would see huge benefits not only to the health and the safety of our communities, but to the budgets of local communities.
You know, there's a Harvard University economist who came up with a number that's even larger, $77 billion a year he thinks we could raise from taxes.
Yeah, we're actually talking about the same economist, and that is Professor Myron, and what he's done and what we have done as members of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition is calculate the total amount of money that we're currently spending and in effect add to that the savings that would result, or the revenue, I should say, that would result if government were to tax and regulate marijuana. So what we'd be looking at is a figure on the order of $77 billion.
Yeah. Now we're out of time, Norm, but I got to tell you, I went from being in the middle in this to absolutely on the side of ending this prohibition because, as you point out in the Netherlands, drug use doesn't go up, it goes down. So there's no downside to it. Taxes, we collect more money, we get rid of the gang warfare, and the use goes down. It's the biggest no-brainer of all time, and of course that's why governments all across the country are against it.
Well, and around the world, we're seeing Latin American countries, Middle Eastern countries, the United Kingdom. Many nations are now beginning to recognize exactly what you're talking about, and we're poised to do something about it finally.
Norm Stamper, retired police chief and part of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, LEAP. Thank you so much for joining us. Really
My pleasure. Thank you.
Young Turks.